Now, in our last episode, the Pet Detective team helped Mr. Pickles, America's #1 clown pickle, and the Canadian Clown Company find a way to bring business and tourism back to their fair cities. When our team returned to the feed store/office, Polly Opossum was all business as usual and informed the team they had a request from the Children's Hospital to have the team make an appearance and visit the children at the hospital. Now, the Pet Detective team have been totally unaware of how famous they have become. Locally though it may be, they have become famous. Now, of course, they agreed to go to the Children's Hospital and visit and entertain all the children there. One of the main reasons is little Thomas. When he was just a few weeks old, he was operated on at this hospital, and for that reason alone, they felt obligated to go. So Polly made sure they all took baths and had clean clothes on, and they loaded up into the Pet Detective van. Bright blue with the Pet Detective logos on the doors, off to the hospital they went. The children couldn't help but see the van pull into the parking lot, and everyone could feel the excitement in the air. Oh, now where's little Thomas? Well, Thomas's dad said he needed Thomas's help. You see, his dad loves to go four-wheeling, and his four-wheel drive club had volunteered to clean up some hiking trails way back in the Sierra Mountains by Yosemite National Park. So they loaded up the saws and shovels, rakes, tents, and radios, and all the rest of the gear, and off they went. Well, that's after Thomas's mom packed the ice chest full of food and drinks. Now, they took a very little used dirt road and trail to the work site. However, they were the only ones to make it there because it was so far back in the mountains. Just the way they like it. Now, not wasting any time, they started sawing up the trees that had fallen across the hiking trails and clearing a path for the hikers. After a couple of hours, a group of young hikers came by and thanked Thomas and his dad for all their hard work. Thomas introduced himself and let the hikers know about a rough spot on the trail just up ahead and to be careful. They thanked Thomas and were on their way. Thomas went back to work with his dad, and all was fine until... Well, we'll get back to that in a minute. Meanwhile, the Pet Detectives had met the staff at the Children's Hospital and quickly moved from floor to floor, making sure they talked to each and every child, even the shy ones. They couldn't help but laugh when Samuel and Isaac, the twin red foxes, that can only be told apart by Isaac's black-rimmed glasses, when they both would race around the room just as fast as lightning, running underneath and over top of the beds, pretending to chase each other, because Samuel took a little green ball away from Isaac and the chase was on. Samuel with the little green ball in his mouth, Isaac pretended to want it back, and they both ran and chased and scampered all around the room, under tables and chairs and over beds. The children were laughing as Samuel hid from Isaac as he pretended to be a lamp. Then Charlie came into the room, acting like a doctor, and would sternly yell out, "What's going on here?" And all the children knew it was Charlie, and they laughed, and they said, "Good morning, Dr. Charlie." Dr. Charlie pretended to be a tough doctor, which he wasn't very good at. And Dr. Charlie said, "Well, I can't have all these kids laughing and having a good time. These two foxes must be stopped." Dr. Charles called out, "Guard, guard, get in here. Find and catch these foxes." Then, bursting through the doors, came Pepe and Ruger, dressed like English bobbies. Samuel mockingly stood at attention and saluted Ruger, and Isaac snuck up behind Pepe and took his hat from him, and off they both ran again. This time, Ruger had a net on a long pole, and he chased Samuel and Isaac around the room, trying his best to catch him, but not really. But the children cheered every time Ruger missed with his net. This went on for just a short time before Nurse Bailey came into the room. And Nurse Bailey didn't have to say anything. She just stood there akimbo, that's with her hands on her hips, and then gave them all that kind of look your mother gives you when she wants you to stop horsing around. And all the children know the international mom look. No translation is ever needed for that. Samuel once again properly saluted Nurse Bailey, and Isaac put Pepe's hat back on. Nurse Bailey said, "Now, there will be no horseplay in this hospital." Then Samuel and Isaac said, "Nurse Bailey, we never horseplay, honest." "We only fox play," and out the doors they both dashed, and off to the next floor of the hospital they went. Just about the same time the team were finishing up their visit, Polly Opossum heard a call come over her shortwave radio, and it was little Thomas. Polly said, "I thought you and your dad were up in the mountains clearing hiking trails." Thomas said, "Yes, they are, and they met some young hikers, and a little while later they heard the hikers call out for help. So they went to check on them, and they found that the trail they were on had collapsed, sending them far down the edge of the mountain, injuring all 3 hikers." Now Thomas's dad, always one to come prepared and to help, parked his Jeep at the edge of the broken trail, lowered the cable from the winch on the front of his Jeep, while Thomas gave directions to lower or raise the cable after each hiker was attached with the rope harness Thomas had tied together. One by one they raised the hikers up from the cliff. Once they got them back onto the hiking trail, Thomas and his dad got out the first aid kit from the Jeep and cleaned and bandaged all the hikers. But they were in no shape to make the long Jeep ride back to town to the hospital for proper care they all needed. So that's when Thomas called Polly Opossum on the shortwave radio and gave the coordinates and the position of the camp they'd set up to make sure the hikers can rest comfortably until the helicopter gets there. Right away, Polly Opossum called Bailey at the Children's Hospital and told Bailey about Thomas and the hikers, and they needed a helicopter. Polly knew the closest hospital to the hikers was the Children's Hospital. Bailey informed the hospital, and the pilots on duty got their flight suits and helmets on in a flash and started racing towards the helicopter. But the one thing they forgot to do was to tie their shoelaces. At top running speed, they stepped on their laces and fell, each one breaking a leg. Back to the hospital they both went. "Now what?" the hospital is asking. "And it's already very late in the afternoon, and soon the sun will be setting." Pepe said in his loud voice, "Not to worry, that his old buddy Charlie is an excellent pilot. Why..." Now this is where Pepe would have been better off if he just stopped speaking, but as always, Pepe continues speaking. "Why, I've seen Charlie fly helicopters, jets, big airliners, crop dusters, the space shuttle, paper airplanes, covered chuck wagons, a lawnmower, wheelbarrows." Right away, Bailey stepped in and explained, "Charlie has his helicopter's pilot license, and Ruger has his helicopter learner permit. Also, Colonel is a navigator, a skill in which he learned during the time he served in the armed forces." Pepe chimed in, "He's so good he can find your lost car keys or your missing sock." Even with Pepe carrying on, the hospital agreed to give it a go with the Pet Detective flight team, for they really had no other choice. Pepe did grumble. It was lucky he was there because Bailey was not sticking to the facts like he did. Bailey just rolled her eyes and her best girly voice said, "Oh, thank you, Pepe, you're my hero." All the children laughed at that. Even Pepe had to smile a little bit, for he thought it was funny too. With Charlie, Ruger, and little Colonel all suited up, and Colonel had the proper coordinates of Thomas's location, Charlie performed all the pre-flight checks and started up the helicopter and soon lifted off and heading due east as the sun was setting in the west. Bailey radioed Thomas and his dad to check on the hikers. From their report, they had done all the proper first aid and now just needed to wait on the helicopter. Now Thomas's dad loves to come prepared. He had a tent set up with sleeping bags and pillows, and a campfire started to help keep the hikers warm and to help Charlie and his crew be able to spot them in the dark. Thomas did radio Polly again and asked her to call his mom and let her know what was going on and that they were all right. Polly said no problem. Colonel in the back overheard all this with Thomas and Polly on the radio, and Colonel said, "Roger that." Colonel said, "I love saying that." Now Charlie and his helicopter rescue crew were in the Sierra Mountains and it was dark. So Ruger turned on the big searchlight on front of the helicopter, and soon over the horizon they spotted the campsite, the campfire, and little Thomas and his flashlight signaling the helicopter. They circled the campsite a couple of times, and they could see that Thomas and his dad wisely picked out a campsite that was perfect to land the helicopter. This is only due to Thomas and his dad using common sense and thinking ahead. and it was a good place to land the helicopter safely. Once they landed safely on the ground, they carefully loaded up the hikers and the helicopter lifted off, and they were heading back to the Children's Hospital ASAP. That's when Isaac radioed Little Colonel about a big storm heading their way, and they may not be able to make it back safely. Colonel said not to worry. The Little Colonel looked over all of his maps and found a shortcut that'll help him cut the trip home in half the time. Now they did make it back before the big storm and safely landed at the hospital. Thomas and his dad spent the night at the campsite and made it home the next morning. The Pet Detective team were exhausted. What a day! Visiting all the children and joking around, and the helicopter rescue. So the Pet Detective team bid farewell to everyone at the hospital and all loaded up into the van and headed home for a much-earned rest. Now Charlie says hit that like and subscribe buttons. And it doesn't cost you anything to hit that notification bell. You'll never smile again if you miss an episode. And Little Colonel says leave a comment. And Charlie says he'd like to hear from you because he's all ears. Colonel says roger that. And be sure to share the episode. It's free and a bargain at twice the price. Hey, and we'll see you next time on the Adventures of the Pet Detectives.